Great to see you all. Wonderful. What incredible age range is seen here at the Scottish Family Party Conference 2024. Definitely with the emphasis on family. Great to see you all. Just a little bit of a welcome and some introductions shortly to our Scottish Family Party team. First of all, myself. My name is David Richardson. I pastor a church very close to here. I've been delighted to be asked to address you and host this event this afternoon. Loos, if you've not already found them, my mum always used to say, never pass a good loo. But they are, as I'm standing here, through those doors and off to the left, and follow the signs. Follow the signs. Hopefully not the smell, just the signs. There's no fire drill anticipated here at all. So if the alarm does go off, please just follow the fire exit signs, which are everywhere. Very good in this venue, indeed. The only thing I do always tell folk, you might see the man running on the green sign. Don't run. I don't know why it says has the man running. Make your way cautiously out of the building so as we don't have a stampede. But hopefully the only fire that will be exhibited here will be the fire in our hearts on the many subjects that we'll be touching upon. So without further ado, as I attempt to keep to the schedule, we're going to invite our chairman, Leo Lanahan, to address us and introduce himself for a few minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Very good, very good. So we're gathered here from all the regions of Scotland, just about, I think, are represented. So we've got, we have electoral regions. So we've got Glasgow, we've got Central Scotland, Edinburgh, West of Scotland, South Scotland, Highlands and Islands, Lothian, Mid-Scotland, Fife, and North East Scotland. So these are all the regions where we want to capture votes. We need to capture votes on that second vote list. So that's why we're a national party in Scotland, and we clearly are. So we organise ourselves. I just want to give a quick mention now we have regional chairmen. So we have today, we've got Gareth Kirk is here. I saw him come in today. We have to point. That's what they do, isn't it, on the telly, the point. We have Jonathan Richardson, I think, is here. He may be on his way. There he is. So Stephen Welsh is here from somewhere called Stornoway. And I saw him there. Where is he? He's hiding away. There he is. Great stuff. Well done. I'd only seen Stephen on a Zoom call before today. He's taller in real life than, yes. So, I got a laugh. That's good. We're doing well. So, is Susan Ettle here? And Susan here? And Dorothy Yost? Hey, very good. So, now unfortunately, Ewan Morris from Aberdeen region, he's not able to be here today. He'll get a further mention later on. I think Liam McKechnie is joining us today. Is Liam here? There he is, hiding at the back. Well done, Liam. And Neil, of course, everybody knows. Neil is doing all our administration. He's here organising for Edinburgh. So thank you very much. So I've just got a few remarks. I'm not going to spend too long. One of the main things I want to mention, and our theme of the day, Contending for the Truth, is these wee packs here that you'll see on the table across there. And there's this pack. I'll tell you more in a moment. There's also a leaflet about influencing churches and Christians. And there's also a survey or a questionnaire. And I'll say more about that shortly. So members, activists, we are a movement for the family. Our policies are about strengthening family life. We know that many of society's problems could be solved by strengthening commitment to marriage and the family. And our candidates put the case for the family in this last year, and we spoke to thousands of voters in 2024. So we see rising rates of mental ill health from the census in 2022. We've seen this year that drug deaths are more than in 2023. There's over 1,000 drug deaths in 2024 already. We have more people in Scotland aged over 65 than under 15. So there's clearly a crisis in childbirth. And of course, abortion rates continue to rise. So a big thank you to our candidates, a big thank you to our supporters. You went door to door with our leaflets and election material, and with every step you were contending for the truth. Truth in education, truth about life from conception to natural death, and truth about marriage, and truth about investing in the family. And I just want to thank you all for that effort and for being here today. We're going to continue to be out and about making the case for marriage as the best building block for society, for young people and for children. Well, so Richard has founded and is continuing to build a political party with principled policies. We're not a protest movement. It's a movement seeking to put MSPs in Holyrood and in the UK Parliament, and we are ambitious, yes, and why not? We must focus on Scottish, local, and UK issues, focus on real concerns in the present, and present a rational, professional, intelligent, and competent image before the voters. I'm sure you'll agree with me that our voices have not been silenced by all the recent legislation, including the buffer zone legislation, and won't be silenced. Our movement is growing, and the numbers here today demonstrate our potential. And I just want to, again, to say I thank you very much for all that you are doing. So just turning to, as I mentioned before, the leaflets. There's the questionnaire, which is going to gather information about what are Christians' concerns and voters' concerns. So there's a series of questions you can look at there later. The leaflet pack has got about 6 or 7 leaflets, very well written, that cover all major issues that should be issues that are touching on God's truth and our policies. So that's someone. So there's one to take away for everyone here, and then you can order more and take packs of more, and there will be a charge for the packs to cover the cost. And then if you are going to speak to churches and to other members of your churches, there's some guidance notes there that Richard's prepared for us about how to approach that and some of the things to avoid or issues to be aware of. So the Scottish Family Party is growing. We are committed to contending for the truth, and we're going to be fielding candidates across Scotland in 2026 and in local elections in 2027. So I just want to mention the opportunity later on. There will be an opportunity to come and speak to us about if you have an interest in getting involved as a local candidate for 2027, because the preparation needs to start now, or in 2026. So you can come and speak to me about that, or to Tobias about that, who you'll hear from later on. I've stunned you all to silence. Anyway, so I want to mention, just before I hand back to David, that Alan, our treasurer, who is going to speak to us soon, will be handing over the bookkeeping to our member who can't be here today, Ewan Morris from Aberdeen. And it's just a brief word of thanks to Alan for all his hard work, for his professionalism, his service, and his support to Richard and the leadership team in recent years. We hope that what we'll do sometime in the new year is plan a wee event to say thank you to Alan in a more formal way. But for now, I would just like you to put your hands together for Alan for all that he's done. So, I think... Oh, am I introducing Tobias? Oh, gosh. Tobias is our campaign manager, and he's going to come and speak to us now on his role and his activity during the last 12 months.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to speak today. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Richard for the last 18 to 20 months, because we've been building on experience, and we've been building our membership, we've been building our activism, and all of that comes down to this pro-marriage, pro-family, pro-life values. And this is what will be discussed later today. So for those of you who don't know me, as Leo mentioned, I'm the campaign manager. I've been serving and volunteering for the Scottish Family Party since December of 2021. And over the last 18 months, I have been put with the challenge of contesting the 2024 election for the Scottish Family Party and implementing a strategy and rebranding how we stand our activists. So just a brief summary of the election campaign. It started about 18 months ago when I was put in charge of candidate training, and I worked alongside with Leo for selection. It was my first major election in the post. I had limited prior experience, but thanks to the expertise of our former chairman, Michael Willis, I was able to develop my knowledge and get straight on the ball and get things moving. So in the 2024 UK general election, which was for Westminster, we stood 16 candidates on a very tight schedule in 16 different constituencies across Scotland. The timeline for that, because of the Conservative announcement of when the election would be, made it more difficult for us. So thank you to everybody who donated and got behind our candidates as early as possible to make sure we had the confidence in running. During that campaign, I made lots and lots of friends and met some brilliant people. A lot of it was providing updates and instructions to candidates, and through that we've been able to professionalize our relationships and building that professionalism that is needed for a serious political party. Over the past few months, we've also had some council by-elections where I've delegated to branch chairmen individuals to get involved in their local communities. And just yesterday, we had some results come in from Aberdeenshire where we doubled our percentage in result in Fraserburgh district and also Banff Buchan Central, I think it was. So the chairman with our council by-elections, I'd also like to thank you for putting in the effort to make sure we appear on the ballot at every chance. So over the last 18 months, I'd like to reiterate that we're building and professionalising our party, and with that, we were able to contest the Westminster election. It has to be bared in mind also that Westminster isn't our target, so I think we did the best possible we could given these unprecedented circumstances that we had. So the second part of my message today is how do we implement local strategies going forward? Because there's a wider philosophy to campaigning, and it takes a lot of energy out of you, trust me. So going forward, I would like to today extend my invitation to everyone to consider being a candidate in both the 2026 Scottish elections, but primarily aim for 2027 local elections. This will consist of local groups leafleting chosen council wards, which will be determined by our branch chairman and myself. A minimum starting from about now, every 3 months, we want to see candidates out in their communities doing things and leafleting, more importantly. Groups will get behind the local candidate, and we need committed people. And what we want to do is build local community as well. So with that movement, it's not just about the party politics, it's also about building the community, having those conversations, and being able to get people behind you so that you know you're able to extend your chances of being elected via building the team. We see in other political parties, their main aim is to be on the ground as much as possible. And this is also my intention to implement into this party. So what and how can we do this? And why must you get involved? So my best advice, firstly, with the Scottish Family Party, is find where you can confidently and consistently help out if you'd like to. For me, it was being behind the scenes and helping and managing campaigns. And it also meant that I was filling in a lot of paperwork, but it also means that I'll be considering being a candidate in the future, because I've seen how candidates prepare themselves and actively improve their skills. So how can you do this? I'd like everybody to consider contacting their branch chairman. And if you're not in a region that currently has a branch chairman, the next closest will do. So one of the important things about getting involved is that pro-life policy that the Scottish Family Party holds, and it's the only political party in Scotland to do so. It's a very hard line. It might not be popular today, but unfortunately, I've seen over the last months in the pro-life movement, we tend to complain a lot about the laws in Scotland and the UK, and there's too little too late sometimes. But without every member and supporter possible, I don't think we'll make any progress with this party. So I emphasize today to get involved. I also would like to point out that unfortunately across the last few months during the pro-life movement, we've become divided on other issues. So if we can get behind the pro-life candidates, we have a much higher chance of being elected. And just to finish, one of the reasons I'd like everybody possible and to share the word to get involved with the SFP as well, with that pro-life, pro-marriage, pro-family unique policies, is that we owe it to every child that has been taken by abortion, and we also owe it to everybody who has not been given the opportunity to reside in a healthy family or a stable household. Thank you very much.
So slowly but surely, you're getting to meet the team, which is wonderful. Tobias, our campaign manager, Leo, our long-suffering chairman. Before the day's out, you'll have perhaps even met Richard, but also heard him speak. And we have some wonderful other characters involved. I'm a deputy chairman, along with Gareth. He also is part of this team. But I'm going to introduce you now to our treasurer, who is outgoing, as in leaving us. I'm sure he's not leaving the party, but leaving his responsibilities. We just gave a round of applause to him. So I wanted to, normally Tobias would introduce Alan, but I wanted to, let's give a really good round of applause all the way up to the lectern for this dear man, Alan, and all the hard work he's done for the party. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
My goodness, this is going to have to be good, isn't it? All that applause beforehand. I just hope that what I have to say to you today will, in some degree at least, be uplifting. Before I deliver a few thoughts by way of speech, a brief financial report for the 12 months to 31st of October 2024. During the past year, total income of the party amounted to £56,746, expenditure £52,970. So Mr. McCobber would tell us that's good because there was a surplus of 3,776. We tend to sail fairly close to the wind, but thankfully that figure is positive and not negative. The previous year income was 45,604 and expenditure 42,991. So a smaller surplus, but a surplus nevertheless. The figures were higher this year because I think largely the one-off donations to fund the Westminster election. Last year at conference, I invited everyone to participate in what I called the 400 by 150 club. And thankfully, 31 donations came in for a total of £4,650. Just a wee bit short of the 60,000 that we would have received if my 400 members had followed through. There's no objection if you want to add a bit to your monthly subscription. You can take account of inflation like every other organisation. Our costs are rising. Just to flip back to the 400 by 150 club, what I had suggested was that you rake through your shed and your garage and your house or your attic, find things that you don't need and don't use, sell them on eBay, and make that donation of £150. You can still do it if you like. Some of you may remember in a previous conference report, I invited you to buy the party a cup of coffee. I can't remember how much a cup of coffee was at the time, but to buy a cup of coffee every month for the party, once a month, and add that to your monthly subs or whatever your contributions. Anyway, this year I suggest maybe we could add a muffin. If every member increased their monthly contribution by the cost of a couple of quid for a muffin, the annual income would increase by more than £10,000. Not bad for the price of a muffin. Okay, that concludes my reference to money. That was a really fun bit, isn't it? I would like to just address a few words to the theme of the conference today. When I heard that this was going to be our theme today, I've entitled my remarks, Truth Will Prevail. And I want to speak a little bit about truth. Too many people think that truth is what you want it to be. Relativism is a myth. There are absolute truths in this world. If I step off this platform, I'm going to fall on the floor. Absolutely. The law of gravity is an absolute certainty. I looked at a website recently, Clinical Advisory Network website, on sex and gender. Quote from that website, "A person's genetic inheritance, their biological sex, is an immutable characteristic." Close quote. I wholly support the view that gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. Further quoting from the CAN website, it says this: "While the use of exogenous opposite-sex hormones and surgery is known as medical transitioning, these do not change a person's underlying biological sex." Putting that in my own words, a woman cannot become a man cannot become a woman. Now, what I want to do here is, just indulge me for a wee bit. Everybody who is fit and able, could I ask you to stand, please? Okay, now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. So if everyone closes their eyes, and then using your right arm, I want you, being careful not to wallop the person next to you, I want you to point north. Eyes closed, please. Everyone, eyes closed. Okay, now keeping your fingers pointing, open your eyes and have a look. Okay? Thank you. Please be seated. It looks like there's quite a bit of disagreement on where north is. So to resolve this, there's various things we could do. We could have a vote on it, or maybe we could have an arm wrestling contest, and the strongest person could decide. Or maybe the wealthiest person could decide. Or, well, maybe just decide what north is for you. Relativism rears its ugly head again, eh? But we have access to this little thing here. It's called a compass. And I knew this was happening today. I think I'm the only one that knew it was happening today, or maybe my wife knew. So I was able to actually check this out earlier. In fact, I used my phone, so I can tell you that we're 30 metres above sea level right here. Okay, we're 30 metres above the Clyde. So, north, basically, according to this little fella here, runs roughly from that corner of the hall through that corner of the hall. Okay? So, it's somewhere in that trajectory. So, obviously, the further over you are one way or the other would have some bearing on where it is. It's not up to you, and it's not up to me where north is. Truth will prevail. Here's another absolute truth for you. There are more than 8 billion people in this world, on this planet. Every single one of them was born of a woman. Every single one of them was fathered by a man. Whether through human intimacy or in a test tube or whatever way, an egg from a woman and a sperm from a man unite. The result is the formation of another human life. No exceptions. These are absolute truths. Here's another absolute truth for you. Every one of those 8 billion plus people will die. No exceptions. As members of this party, we must align our lives and our choices with true North principles. We need to leave voters in no doubt that we represent truth, because truth will prevail. This party calls upon responsible citizens and officers of government to promote measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society, not the opposite, where the family is relentlessly attacked and complete destruction is in the mind of those who do the attacking. Truth will prevail. I love this wee quote from Mahatma Gandhi. A small group of determined spirits fired by an...
Thank you so much, Alan, and that was wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. In my remarks earlier, I was going to mention that there'd been a change in the UK political scene in terms of the political parties with the advent of reform, and particularly reform in Scotland. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but reform in Scotland is a problem for the Scottish Family Party in terms of socially conservative voters. So those voters might perceive reform as a pro-life party or an anti-abortion party or a pro-family party. Very much they're not a pro-life party. So we need to be out there making that case. And this concerted campaigning that Tobias was talking about is what we need to do in getting involved in local communities and getting our leaflets through doors and getting known as candidates for local elections and for the Holyrood elections in 2026. So I just give reform a wee mention, but I think it's something that it's important to note. And it's part of the thinking behind the pack of leaflets that I was directing everybody to. Where can we grow supporters from? where should we try and grow supporters from and gain new members from? Well, let's make that try. Let's try churches, let's try Christians, and that's a strategy for the next 12 months. But of course, the Scottish Family Party is a secular party, and we're here for all of Scotland, and we're not a Christian party in that sense. So I just wanted to add those remarks, and now I need to know what the running order is. Or David's going to do that. Okay, thank you.
So myself and Gareth as Deputy Chairman to Leo, our Chairman. Of course, you're going to be listening to Richard a little bit later on, and there's Neil, our Administrator, wonderful Administrator. Alan, a treasure. What a wonderful word that was. That warmed my heart, Alan. That really did. Truth. Real truth. And it's this bravery that we need in our hearts to stand up for the truth. There's too many people are intimidated. It's just a fact of the matter that over so many years, many years, in this world, minorities have been right, and the majority has often been wrong. But of course, for those minorities, it was very difficult to begin with. They needed to be brave. They needed courage. There's so many examples, too many to go over just now. But thank goodness we've a few brave souls here today who are willing to stand up for that truth and the many truths that we stand for in the Scottish Family Party. This is a subject very close to my heart as a pastor of a church not far from here. I'm so glad about the direction that Richard feels we should be reaching out to the Christian church. I feel the Christian church in word is very much for what we stand for in the Scottish Family Party. But alas, there's a disconnect between their words oftentimes and what they follow through with in their actions, in their lives. So it's one of my great desires of my heart to stir up Christians to get more public about their faith, to get more out there and showing folks the truth. Because as the old book says, the good book says, in the end it's the truth that will set you free. And this is a powerful principle borne out, not just in the Christian church, but throughout life in general. So I've mentioned all these different roles and the people who are filling them. Tobias, our campaign manager. But I've missed one out because you're about to hear him. I'm going to give a warm welcome, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Phil Holden, our Deputy Leader of the Scottish Family Party. I'm going to give a warm welcome, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Phil Holden, our Deputy Leader of the Scottish Family Party.
So I'm super excited to be here this morning. And one of the reasons I joined the Scottish Family Party, I've got a few hats. You know, one, I'm Deputy Leader of the Scottish Family Party. Another is I'm a software engineer. And another is that I'm a Christian. And one of the reasons I got involved in the Scottish Family Party was because I saw it was becoming harder and harder to maybe preach the Christian message, because there's many laws coming in that would make it difficult to do so. And that made me think, well, you know, we want to be free to bring our message, freedom of religion and things like that. And in order for that to happen, we need laws that are conducive to that. And I'm so excited that we have Andrea Williams up from Christian Concern, and she's somebody who's been out there defending street preachers and things like that, and standing there for freedom of speech. But also, churches have often drifted away from these moral issues. So you'll often find that maybe in a church, when there's preaching, they will stay on subjects which are kind of quite safe and are not going to rub the culture up the wrong way. And that was actually one of the reasons that I became involved in the Scottish Family Party, because when I looked, I saw Richard was actually standing on lots of these issues that I cared a lot about, and these things were not being talked about in churches. And I thought maybe if I'm on that platform, then I can talk about some of these subjects too. Now, as a Christian, one of my great goals is to be out and to be sharing my faith. And I've been involved in kind of street evangelism and things like that in the past. But because I've had a child, I've had about a 10-year hiatus from doing these kind of things. And so as my daughter's a bit older now, I've been able to get out on the streets again and start engaging with people. And so there's a church that kind of does this kind of outreach on the streets, and they'll do street preaching. Sometimes they do something with a board where people stick things on the board, and they'll speak about Christian things. But there's a guy in this group who was a missionary, and he's back in the UK. And he says he's doing this thing on the streets where he calls it question of the day. And so on the board, he'll stick up a question, and then people will come along and they'll put tally marks on the board to say if they agree or they disagree with that statement. There's no yes, no, and maybe. And what happens is that when they put the tally mark on the board, he just asks one question. And that question is, why? Why did you put that down? And then these great, interesting discussions kind of come of that. And so in that kind of Christian context, the questions are often things like, do you think there is a God? Or something like that. But some are more moral questions. One is like, are you a good person? And then the person lays out why they think, most people say, yes, I am a good person. They quite enjoy that question. Everyone likes to say how good they are. And then we would start talking to them from a moral perspective and maybe speaking from the moral perspective of the Bible and say, if we apply this standard, are you good by those standards? And because of my involvement in the family party, I thought I'd really enjoy to take this out on my own and ask some questions which are quite related to things that we do. And so one of the questions that I have taken out on the street is this one. Do all lives have equal value? And that's quite an interesting question morally, because I wanted to put, do all human lives have equal value? And I was thinking of that from the perspective very much of kind of pro-life. But I didn't have enough room to write human, so I just thought, I'll put, do all lives have human value? And that makes it quite interesting, because you've got the kind of, do animals have the same value as human beings? And I took this out in the street, and people are really kind of engaged with that question. And you think of this from a very secular perspective. It's obvious that you'd put yes, because this underpins, progressive values, that there's equality, that everyone has the same value. But is there a reason why people should say that if they don't have an objective standard? And so this once I was out, two people stopped, and I asked them, what do you think? Do you think all lives have equal value? They were students, one was a boy and one was a girl, and they seemed to be just like two friends who'd come from one lecture, walking together or something like that. And so the guy said, well, what kind of lives do you mean? Do you mean animal lives, or do you mean human lives? And I said, well, you can take this question however you want to, but let's go there. What do you think? Do animals and humans have the same value? And he thought about it for a bit. And he's like, he's there for 30 seconds chewing this over in his mind. And eventually he says, yes, I think that animals and humans do have the same value. And so I said to him, of the girl standing beside him, does she have the same value as a slug? Immediately, no, she's worth much more than a slug. And she was quite taken back by this, because I don't think she knew how strong his feelings were. And that's like a a pretty strong statement to say that a girl is worth more than a slug to you, especially when he's just said the whole of humanity has that value, you know. Other people, I'd ask that question and say, you know, well, what about life in the womb? Does life in the womb have the same value as life outside the womb? These people, the two girls, they'd also said yes to that question. And when I asked it to them, they were like, no, well, you've got to think of the woman in this situation. You've got to consider the woman, you know, because it's her body and it's her choice and these kind of things. And what about somebody who's been raped? And I used an argument that Richard's used before. He says, well, suppose there is somebody who's been raped and they decide to go ahead and they have the baby. But when the baby's born, they look at the baby and they say that this child's face looks like that of my rapist. And so now I want that baby to be killed. Would that be okay? And these two girls are, no, you can't do that at that point because you've got to provide for this child. You've got to give them clothes. You've got to, you know, get people around them. This life needs support. And so I found that these simple questions, they're a bit like, I don't know, moral laxative, that people are kind of a bit twisted up inside. They haven't had a chance to really think about these questions. I went out with Richard, you know, and I'd been telling him about the great experience I've been having on the streets, chatting with people, and he said, oh, I'm going to come along next time you're there. And so I'm chatting with people. I think we had this question, and Richard's like standing by the side, not getting involved too much, you know, just wandering around back and forth and things like this, you know. After a bit, I have a break in a conversation, and Richard said, I see that you're doing, you know, well at this and you're enjoying this, you know, and it's good for you, but I don't think it's my thing. And then I was chatting to some, you know, another group of people, and because I'm involved in a conversation, other people are coming up and putting their mark on the board, and so Richard gets chatting to somebody, and he's having a wonderful conversation with them. I think it's like a philosophy student or something like that. And Richard finds out that they haven't even considered the most basic of moral questions, you know. And so he starts talking to them with a bit of like family party logic and things like that. And he's having a whale of the time. And, you know, the next day he says, you know, I said that this was not my thing. It's totally my thing. I totally enjoyed this, you know. And the amazing thing I found is that by engaging with people, that in these conversations, people are moving. There are things that people believed at the beginning of the conversation that they don't believe at the end. And after I've heard them out on what they believe, and they've tied themselves in a bit of a knot, because I've just thrown the odd like spanner in their work, and you know, I let them say what they want to say, and then I know where they stand, and then I know, you know, what I can say, how I can bring an answer to those questions. Actually, the first conversations I have are normally quite bad. Like I go out, have an idea of where I want to go, the arguments I want to make, and the first 3 or 4 conversations, the first conversation will be like 1 minute, next conversation 5 minutes, next conversation 15, the next like half an hour, and then maybe 45 minutes or something like that. And I find that in that time of talking with people, I'm learning how to argue on these subjects, how to make a point on these subjects. And you've got somebody there straight in front of you. And so as you're engaging with them, you can tell by the reaction if the things that you're saying are registering. And often I'm talking with people and it's looking like, oh, the light's going on, like as I'm saying this. And I say to them, you know, that thing that I said, do you agree with it? What do you think about that? And they'll say, yeah, I think I do. You know, and I'll get through like a 45-minute conversation with somebody, and I'll find out that they've agreed with everything that I've said. You know, and that really, from having done this 10 years ago, that was completely not the position it was. It was like arguments all the way. Every point was contested. And so there's a bit of a phenomenon in the UK which is called kind of cultural Christianity. And often, like as an evangelical Christian before, I would I would be very down on cultural Christianity, not proper Christians. Would be what I would think of that, But actually, these are people who are saying, when I look at the values that come out of Christianity, that these are things that I agree with. These might be people who are atheists, like Richard Dawkins has said, like, I am a cultural Christian, and there's people who are watching things online and people are arguing from like a biblical perspective on things. And these people might not be people who believe in the resurrection or believe many parts of Christianity, but they're just saying that the Bible makes good moral arguments. And so we are not a Christian party. We are a party, we say we've got traditional values. But because the UK, where our values come from, is that we, in the past, have been a Christian nation, that means that the things that the Scottish Family Party is standing on are really kind of those historical Christian values. And that means, it's not just to say that we're a party for Christians, because often it's people that aren't Christians that actually live out those values better. So if you look in India, like the rate at which marriages stay together is so much better than any other Christian country. And so there's many people that might have a religious faith that are socially conservative in their outlook, and they'd very much agree with the moral reasoning in the Bible, And so whether you're Jewish, you're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Hindu, a good chance are that you'd agree with like a lot of the statements that would be made in the Bible on morality. And often I'm finding in these conversations that, the person will lay out what they say, and as the turning point in the conversation, I'll often say, like, Jesus said this. What do you think of that? And often I'll find that after I've explained it a bit, they'll say, yes, I agree with that. And these people aren't Christians, but just through that Jesus was good at arguing for these things. And so sometimes when you use that argument, people say, I can't actually argue against that thing that you're putting there. And again with this, do all lives have equal value? Think of that those two people who said that the slug has the same value as the person, or that's what the guy said. And then he said, no, they don't. And so then I said, well, why do you think all people have equal value? Because from a secular perspective, if you think we've all come from like amoeba to people, then we've become more complex and more complex, and you say the slug is worth less than the person, then if that's true, you'd think that some people are more highly evolved than others. And we've seen all sorts of philosophies in Nazi Germany and eugenics where people have had that kind of view. But that's a rational outcome of that. And so the person said, well, I can't justify the fact that I think that all people have the same value, but it seems intuitive to me that they do. And so you had Alan up here with that compass, that moral compass that people have inside of themselves, that where even if they aren't, thinking from a Christian perspective or something like that, there's something inside of them that we have a morality inside of ourselves. And so this person says, even though I can't justify it, I'm still going to say yes. There were other people who said no to that question, not as many people. And one of the people that said no, I said, well, why do you say people don't have the same value? And he said, well, in my family, there were some people that did terrible things. There were people involved in pedophilia and things, and they were caught doing terrible things, and I don't think they have the same value as somebody who's going out and doing good things. And I found it very interesting because that made me think of different verses in the Bible. There's one verse which says people have together become worthless because we're not following the moral rules that Jesus created us to go out and do, or God created us to go out and do. And there's other places in the Bible which says we all have equal value because we're all made in God's image. And so some of these things, like I found it interesting for my theology because as I'm, going out and doing these questions, it's causing me to have insights and things. And so I've really enjoyed going out on the streets. But the insight that I've had from doing it is that I think that people are ready. People are ready for the message that we have as a party. people are persuadable on the subjects that we want to speak out on. And it's just a case of mobilizing people and getting people out there. You know, online isn't working that well for us at the moment. One of the issues that we have online is that in order to be seen, we have to make our point in a kind of clickbaity way. We have to try and make it look controversial, and that actually can end up putting a lot of people off. So the video might go viral because there's a base of people that will support a fairly extreme statement. And so we might see somebody making some lunatic statement on the left from the progressive side. Maybe they're part of the Green Party or something like that, and we'd put up a video saying somebody has said this ludicrous thing. And then people on the left might find somebody who is socially conservative or on the right of politics, and they say something wild as well. And so both of our videos get lots of views because somebody has said something which is lunatic on either side. And the reality is that people out there on the streets aren't in either of these two positions. You know, and they feel like they have to keep quiet on these subjects because if they speak up, they'll either be associated with this group or they'll be associated with that group. And our job as a party isn't to, you know, reach out to the people who are most extremely opposite to where we stand. I do hope that we win people from that position. But if you looked at the election in the United States, all the focus was on the swing states, on the kind of undecided people in the middle. And I think that that's where many people are in this country. And person after person that I spoke with, at the end of the conversation, they said, "Thank you so much for talking to me on this subject. I've enjoyed that conversation so much. It's given me so much to think about." And so these are people who, you know, they've been maybe hearing things from just one side, or they've been afraid to speak up, or they haven't had that opportunity, like the philosophy student that Richard spoke to, who hadn't even encountered the most basic of moral questions. That when people have a new experience, they enjoy that. They like that these are things that are, you know, are deep inside us. All of us have a conscience. All of us, our conscience will have been speaking to us about things. And so when you actually go out and speak to people on these issues, it kind of does them a favor. And I found that I was able to cover a lot of that ground that I've really wanted to cover with the family party. You know, the same moral issues. But just by coming with a question which is quite neutral in the middle, that doesn't immediately set people on, I'm on this side or I'm on that side. You know, like maybe the sandwich boards that we've had, like, you know, a man can't be a woman can't become a man, simple. Great getting that in the media, absolutely true. But we didn't get so many people coming across to debate with us, or when we've had those signs on the street saying, yes, I'd love to talk to you on that. And so sometimes these neutral questions in the middle, where we can start feeling out where somebody stands, and then we can just, you know, having heard what they have to say, argue back with them and come alongside them and say, well, that seemed a bit inconsistent there. What do you think about this? Then we can see people move on. And I think that it may seem very small, just talking with one or two people. This is something like in the Bible that Jesus said. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a woman who worked a small amount of yeast into 25 kilograms of flour, you know, and she worked really hard with something really tiny. But when she'd done that, the whole batch of dough was leavened. And I think if there's a lot of people working hard with individuals, getting the message out, the moral message that we believe, the values that underpin the family party, and there's many people out there who already are believing these things because they've been swayed by some of the cultural Christian arguments, though they themselves may not be Christians, then we can see a great number of people becoming supportive of the values that we stand on. And then it's not a big leap to see people actually voting for us. And so, these are questions that you could use. And when I've been doing it on the street, I've been doing it from an evangelistic perspective. But you could be doing it from a purely vote for the Scottish Family Party perspective if you're won over by those kind of arguments. Thank you very much for listening.
This person's name is Mark Smallwood. And Mark grew up in Warwickshire. He attended Warwick School and studied philosophy and politics at the University of Bristol. He became interested in politics aged 15 after hearing a talk from a high-profile politician, and consequently led the Politics Society, which had many famous speakers attend. At university, he became a Christian after a spiritual quest involving C.S. Lewis, William Lane Craig, and Nicky Gumbel. And after university, he did a variety of jobs, including being a schools speaker for Life Charity, working on a farm, working as a youth minister, and working in a podiatric clinic. Eventually, he settled on teaching and trained at King's College in London to teach religious education. He currently teaches at a Catholic school in Buckinghamshire and lives in High Wycombe with his wonderful wife, Rowena. Please give a warm welcome to Mark Smallwood.
Thank you, David. Well, it's an honour to be invited to address you here this afternoon in Glasgow. My wife and I flew up last night, and it's my first time here. I have been to Edinburgh before, but apparently say the only good thing to come out of Edinburgh is the 10:30 to Glasgow. That's my dad's joke. So as David said, I'm a religious studies teacher by trade down south. And I'm married to the lovely Rowena, who during my election campaign became Chief Wardrobe Officer, Social Media Manager, and Wellbeing Advisor. So thank you, Rowena. I'm here as a representative of Vote Life. Vote Life is a strategic movement seeking to make abortion a voting issue by emboldening already pro-life parties, such as your own, challenging non-pro-life parties, and working towards becoming a significant vote threat. Now, during the 2024 election, we worked as a network of independent candidates standing in constituencies from Gateshead to London. Now, I'm not here to encourage you to stand as an independent candidate. In fact, I think you should stand for the Scottish Family Party. And so I fully support Tobias's message earlier, and perhaps one or two of the things I've got to say will encourage you to do that, not least helping you to learn from some of my mistakes. So that's who I am. So why was Vote Life set up? Well, in general, Vote Life exists because of the truth about abortion. So in 1967, as I'm sure many of you are aware, abortion was decriminalized on certain conditions in the United Kingdom. And since that point, the killing of innocent children in the womb has multiplied to the point where last year there were over 250,000 lives lost, nearly 20,000 of which were in Scotland. In particular, Vote Life is the brainchild of my friend Christian Hacking, who saw an opportunity in the electoral system to speak up for babies in the womb. You see, if you stand as a candidate in an election, the post office will deliver your literature free of charge. All you need to do is print it. And so we could use that opportunity to get pictures of the unborn baby showing its humanity through the doors of everybody in those constituencies. All that Christian needed then was candidates to stand in constituencies. And that's where I and 22 others came in. So now I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my story and why I became involved in Vote Life. So it begins at school. And I remember studying abortion at school and coming to the conclusion that no one really knows when this developing human becomes a person. And so therefore, the choice should rest with the person who has to live with the consequences, i.e., the woman. At least that's the way I thought about it at that time. So I was by default pro-choice. But things changed when I went to university. I became a Christian, and having the ambition of entering politics, I went for an internship at Christian Concern. Thank you, Andrea. And it was there where I saw the pictures which would change my life. They showed us pictures of the reality of abortion, the truth of abortion. And the sophistry of personhood and choice fell away. And all I could see was little human beings who had been brutally murdered. And at that point, doing nothing was no longer an option. I felt that I must speak up for these fellow human beings. And at this point, I'd like to refer to two portions of sacred scripture because they express so eloquently what was laid upon my heart. The first is Proverbs 24:11. Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay everyone according to their works? And the second is Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. There's none more destitute, none less able to speak for themselves at the present than the unborn child. So I joined the Pro-Life Society at university, and I remember at one meeting being moved to stand up and say, before God and witnesses, I will use my voice to speak up for the unborn child. And so when a friend sent me a message with Christian Hacking's call for candidates to come and join the election campaign, I felt that I really could do no other. So that's how I became involved with Vote Life. So what I'd like to do now is share with you a little bit about the campaign, how it went, and some of the lessons that I learned from it. So the campaign began for me when I filled out and signed my nomination papers in Aylesbury Council offices on the 6th of June 2024 with the cleaner as my witness. It's funny, actually, lots of people joined at the last minute. We were scrabbling around to get candidates. God willing, it won't be like that for you guys. But I had one friend who was supposed to be going and working somewhere, and I said, oh, don't worry, they'll understand. And she actually did. She ended up standing and running as an MP. Anyway, the date, the 6th of June, was very significant to me because it was 80 years to the day since our forefathers stormed the beaches of Normandy, fighting to give us the freedom to stand in free and fair elections. And I could think of no better tribute than to exercise those freedoms which they fought for and which we remember at this time of year, and especially standing for those who cannot fight for themselves. And for their sacrifice, I'm profoundly grateful. The campaign began with a great buzz and a sense of camaraderie. There was a sense of we few, we happy few, we band of brothers, as we stood in this battle against forces far greater than ourselves. But we trusted, as I suspect many of you do here, that he who was with us was greater than he who was in the world. And so in his name we went. So I was put in charge of hustings. For those of you who don't know, hustings is where a panel of innocent MPs are grilled by a hungry public audience. It was a little bit of a Daniel in the lion's den experience. We had 9 hustings altogether, and 4 of them were mine. So my first hustings was at a church in the centre of town on a Friday night, when I should rightly have been in the pub. I felt somewhat blissfully optimistic, and I wandered around the audience schmoozing beforehand and shaking hands. And this was a routine I would actually abandon later, and I'll tell you why. But perhaps my main lesson from that hustings was the importance of establishing common ground with the audience. Links actually to what Phil was saying. We'd been asked a question about whether we agreed that the increasing use of food banks was a moral stain on our society. In my zeal, I rushed to respond first and immediately almost segued to the issue of abortion. you know, the true moral stain in our country is the taking of innocent lives and so on. It didn't go down very well. I'd in effect pushed aside this man's legitimate concerns about poverty to talk about abortion. Now, I make no apology in one sense in pointing out the transcendent importance of abortion as a life or death issue. However, I had not taken that man or the audience with me. So the first lesson, which you could use, is about common ground, empathizing with people's concerns and finding some common ground. The second lesson that comes from this, actually, is it illustrates the great advantage that you have in standing for the Scottish Family Party, because you have a portfolio of principles and policies which will enable you to talk to any issue. So, for example, you might have said to the questioner, well, family breakdown is a major cause of poverty, and we should incentivize marriage, which I believe is one of your policies, and encourage people to stay together through the tax system. I've lost my notes. There we are. The next hustings was a local radio debate. And the lesson from this is the power of a good question, again, linking to what Phil said. My local Conservative candidate, who was actually Steve Baker, some of you might have heard of him, was a government minister. And so I posed this question to him. I said, the government has just announced baby loss certificates for women who miscarry before 24 weeks. And rightly so, because they're acknowledging the loss and the grief of mothers. But you support the current abortion law, which allows those babies to be killed in the womb before 24 weeks. So is it a baby before 24 weeks, or is it not? And if it is, how is it acceptable to take its life? Of course, he didn't answer that question. It was left hanging, but it shows the power of a good question. The third hustings was the one I dreaded the most. It was at a local university, and the press were there. And a fellow candidate had recently given a talk at his university and had to put up with a group of protesters drumming throughout his talk. And so I remember thinking, oh no, students, this is going to be terrible. And I had a fluttering heart and cold palms all day. And yet, this was probably my best performance. My main encouragement from this hustings was that if you stick to your principles and your convictions in the face of jeering and scorn, you will win people over. A number of people came up to me afterwards to shake my hand and say just how much respect for me they had for doing just that. And so I would encourage all of you to do the same, whether it be on abortion, gender ideology, marriage, or identity politics. Stick to the truth with courage, and you will win people's respect. So the fourth and final hustings was at a local evangelical church. And strangely enough, it was perhaps the most discouraging. And I think it taught me the reality of the opposition and the importance of, as Andrea was saying, perseverance. Before the talk, I was doing my usual schmoozing, and I went to shake one man's hand, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm not going to shake your hand. Your views disgust me." Now, I'd had a similar encounter after the first hustings, but it was like water off a duck's back. But this, coming right before I was about to speak, was quite discouraging. I mean, imagine getting up to speak knowing that there were people who really meant you ill will. And so it just reminded me of the importance of exercising some prudence about how vulnerable we make ourselves. And to that end as well, my wife was the social media manager, and I didn't look at the comments of any sort of Instagram videos that I did, because I thought, I've got to protect myself. Jesus himself said, "Don't cast your pearls before pigs, lest they turn and tear you to pieces." So it's just about being careful. Now, as a consequence of that interaction, I was a bit more timid, and I don't think I really spoke up for the baby in the womb as boldly as I might have. I should not have let myself be cowed. There's no shame in drilling your message, if it is the truth, home again and again and again. Sometimes people need to hear the truth more than once. Now, after that hustings, the last real element of my campaign was a video I made for a local news outlet. Vote Life provided me with a really sharp camera guy who just happened to live in my town, which was really providential. And I think I reached more people with that video than with anything else other than the leaflets. My social media chief made me an Instagram page, and it reached over 2,000 people. And I even had kids from my school coming to talk to me about it. By the way, the next generation school children are, by instinct, a lot of them are really pro-life. This was a real providence, and it reminds me of that quote, "Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid." So the results, what did we achieve? Well, no one got elected, but that's okay, because that wasn't the aim of our campaign. We did, however, reach over 1 million homes with the truth in pictorial form about the baby in the womb and the facts of abortion. We stood 22 candidates and gained over 5,000 votes. Our candidates were young and old, men and women. We had students and grandparents, working age folks and retirees. We had people from all different ethnic backgrounds. And we had a number of people who had themselves had abortions and were able to speak with such power and with grace over the issue of abortion. We managed to show, I think, that abortion is not a right or left issue, not a conservative or progressive issue, but a humanitarian one. We managed to field candidates against the major pro-choice politicians, such as Stella Creasy. And we reached goodness knows how many other people through media, doorstep conversations, interviews in local papers, radio interviews, hustings, and social media. It was very satisfying to see, after the university hustings, my words in black and white in the newspaper. Mark Smallwood said that abortion was a humanitarian tragedy on an unprecedented scale. I mean, wow, how often do you see words like that in the newspaper? And for me personally, I think there was an increase in courage. I remember a month or two later, I had a meeting with the executive head of my school about something unrelated. And I was a bit nervous, and I looked at myself in the mirror. I said, "What are you nervous for? Don't you remember the hustings? Don't you remember all that you did?" And so it really actually helped me personally. So there's another a bit of carrot for you in terms of standing as a candidate for the Scottish Family Party. So what next? Over the next 5 years, Vote Life is seeking to build this UK-wide abolition network, which you can be a part of. Just visit our website and sign up to our newsletter. You can also come to our conference, which, again, we're not a political party, so there's no rivalry here. We're partners, on the 22nd of March in Coventry. And you can join us on the Wilberforce Walk on the 30th of August, 2025. For me personally, I think that we need to win the Church of Jesus Christ. That's why I became a speaker for Brephos, an organization that sends speakers into churches. Do look them up too. I think the church must be the vanguard of this social movement, as it was in the abolition of the slave trade and so many others, to the glory of God. And this is because the kind of change we are working for can only come in the power of the Holy Spirit. I say this as a representative of myself and Vote Life, not as a representative of the Scottish Family Party, but that is what I believe. One of my political heroes, Lord Shaftesbury, a.k.a. the poor man's Earl, who led campaigns to stop child labour, the exploitation of factory workers, and the miserable treatment of lunatics, said social reforms, so necessary, so indispensable, require as much of God's grace as a change of heart. How true this is. When William Wilberforce began his campaign to abolish the slave trade, he was fighting a monster that was bloated on the equivalent of £2.5 trillion. That's how much Britain made off the slave trade, according to the Wilberforce Museum. At the beginning of his campaign, the great revivalist Wesley wrote to him saying, "Unless the divine power has raised you up to be Athanasius against the world, I see not how you can go through your glorious enterprise in opposing that execrable villainy, which is the scandal of religion, of England, and of human nature. Unless God has raised you up for this very thing, you will be worn out by the opposition of men and devils. But if God be for you, who can be against you? Are all of them stronger than God? Oh, be not weary of well-doing. Go on, in the name of God and in the power of his might, till even American slavery, the vilest that ever saw the sun, shall vanish away." In 1807, Wilberforce succeeded with the Clapham sect in leading the campaign to abolish the slave trade. In 1833, slavery itself was abolished throughout the British Empire, and in 1865, slavery was even abolished in the USA. an unstoppable social movement in the power of God's Spirit, witnessing to the victory of Jesus over evil on the cross. Now, I know you guys are focusing on reaching the Church of Jesus Christ over the next year, so I would like to leave you on that note of encouragement and with my prayers. Thank you very much for listening.
I'm about to introduce you to this wonderful guest speaker of ours. We're very happy, Andrea Williams. I'm just going to give you a short bio of this wonderful individual. Andrea qualified as a barrister in 1988. With her background in law, she founded Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre, which have run some of the most high-profile Christian freedom cases and campaigns in Europe. She's a leading analyst, campaigner, and spokeswoman on issues of national and international importance in the moral life of the nations, and a defender of Christian liberties in the parliamentary process, the justice system, and the media. She is passionate. It's my kind of woman, this is. You remind me of my wife, Andrea. You remind me of my wife. She is passionate about seeing our... I'm glad I said that. My wife's here, I think, so that would have been... She is passionate about seeing our culture transformed by the gospel in every area of society. She is married to Gareth, and they have 4 children. That's not our deputy chairman, by the way. That's another Gareth. They have 4 children. Listen to this. On overcoming cancer in 2010, she took up marathon running. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what we all do, isn't it? And has completed 10 marathons. I've eaten 10 marathons. How about that? Wow. She's ran them. I've eaten 10 marathons, so what does that say about the pair of us here? She's completed over 10 marathons while raising money for the work of Christian Concern. You've already given her a warm welcome. Let's give her another warm welcome. Andrea.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you.
Bless you.
God bless you. Bless you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so the title of your conference is Contending for Truth. And you are here because you believe it's worth fighting for, yes? Do you, sitting in this room, you're about 100, 120 people, do you believe that you can make a difference in Scotland? Yes. 12 disciples made a difference, yes? Do you believe that it's possible to get seats in Holyrood? Yes. This is good. It's good that you believe this. Scotland is 5 million people. Glasgow is 600,000, Edinburgh 500,000, more or less. That makes us here today about 0.002% of the population. So the task is steep. The task will be very tiring indeed. We have to have a vision for the long haul because it's not going to happen overnight. We mustn't be defeated. It's something that we have to continue, and it's good to see young people, and indeed very young people here. And indeed, I don't just have the 4 grown-up children, I have a little grandchild on the way. And so, of course, why we contend for truth and for a better civil society is because we are contending for our children and for our grandchildren. What a week it is this week that we happen to be having our conference this week as we have watched the unfolding of the American election. What was it that Donald Trump managed to do? I mean, no matter what people were win. But yes. Okay. Okay. And so he won. Now, why did he win? Didn't give up against the odds. He's certainly not perfect, is he, Donald Trump? But what he did was he spoke to the people on the street. And he spoke, and you see, my first daughter is married to a Puerto Rican, a Latino. They live in California. And the thing that he was doing when a liberal elite were assuming they were the ones to talk on behalf of them somehow, the thing they were doing was speaking to people like my son-in-law, who works really hard, who he happens to be a man full of faith. But let's just talk about that Latino community in California, in Florida, in Georgia, who are really present if you go to these places. What he was doing with those guys, I lived in Atlanta for a couple of years, what he was doing to the Mexicans that work on construction and in the cleaning industries in Atlanta, what he was doing to them is, you know all that hard work that you do? You know those hard-earned dollars that you put in to your pay packet? And I know that you want to keep them for what? For your marriage and for your family. And that you want a better, brighter future for your marriage and for your family. And what was also happening, so you're just speaking directly to them. And on a Democrat ticket that really went big on reproductive rights and a woman's choice and abortion and Hollywood celebrities coming up on the stage and speaking and saying from the stage, I'm doing this for my children because we want the right to what? Kill our children? That wasn't breaking through. It wasn't actually breaking through because it was as if they could no longer... It was an echo chamber. But that echo chamber has entirely dominated the West. And indeed, in order to speak into that situation, before even getting into speaking into that situation, we are, as I have been trying to do for some 30 years, as you seek to speak truth and life, and actually not just normality, you're called you're called a woman hater or misogynist or hateful or bigoted, when in fact you're the opposite. Because in truth gives innate dignity to every single human person, gives them the freedom of choice to choose the way that they will live, gives them freedom to believe in family, freedom to believe in life. So that I think is part of what Trump was managing to do in this extraordinary period that we have lived through in Western culture, when I would contend that truth has been turned on its head, and to speak truth has become something that gets punished in the public space. G.K. Chesterton set forth the universal truth. He said this, set forth a universal truth. The man who thinks without the proper first principles goes mad. And in a sense, that is what is happening in our society. In the United Kingdom, in Scotland, there's been quite a lot of madness. Lots of madness. And I think the people are bewildered. And it's because we've abandoned first principles of truth. Because truth, as has already been said from this platform, sets us free. But truth connects with actually who we are, the condition of our own humanity. Thank you for that incredibly warm welcome. I, from this platform, speak as Andrea Williams, Chief Executive of Christian Concern. And therefore, I say unashamedly that I'm going to frame what I'm going to say to you against the backdrop of my Christian faith. Not just because I believe that that is good for me personally, for you personally, but I believe that contending for that and all the truth that flows from it in society is good for the whole of society. When we diminish that, society becomes entirely diminished. And when we utterly diminish that, we get what we've got in Scotland. We get laws that whereby you can self-identify as man or woman. You're turning biological reality on its head. We're getting laws which punish people that give out Bibles on the street. We've got laws that lock up street preachers. We've got laws that say you cannot pray outside abortion clinics. So that's turning truth on its head. So, the Kingdom of Scotland, as I think many of you will know your Scottish history more than me, emerged as an independent sovereign state in the 9th century. I'm going to skip a few centuries. In 1603, James VI succeeded on the thrones of England and Ireland, forming a personal union of the three kingdoms. On the 1st of May in 1707, Scotland and England combined to create the new Kingdom of Great Britain, with the Parliament of Scotland subsumed into the Parliament of Great Britain. In 1999, a Scottish Parliament, as you know, was re-established and had devolved authority over many areas of domestic policy, vital areas, education, family. The country has its own distinct legal, education system, and religious history. That means that how we shape the culture, what Holyrood is doing, you're very close to. And it's really vital that you take hold of that and believe that you can shape that. And your thrust at this conference today is to awaken the church into doing just that. Awaken the church in believing that the faith that is at the root of true believers, that the truth that is found in Jesus Christ is something that should be loud and clear in the political discourse. And all that flows from it. And part of the malaise of Scotland and the malaise of Great Britain is that we have taken the name of Jesus Christ, what I contend, out of public life entirely. We no longer respect him. We no longer revere him. In the speaking of his name, in making him a public figure, what we then say is that the truth that flows from him is also public truth, and that this is a social good. Christianity never coerces. No one is ever coerced into faith. But as we contend for him truly in public life and say that it is a public good to believe, so we do the public good. Because truth that accords with reality means that people are blessed. I sometimes say a holy people, a righteous people is a happy people. And the reason why we have to contend, I say as Christians, is because we contend for the good of all. We contend for the flourishing of our nation, for our families, for the freedom to be family, for the freedom for the state not to encroach on a family. Because if you do away with God, if you do get away with the social fabric of family, then what do you replace it with? The state. And if the state does not know where truth comes from, then you end up with a chaotic state, many laws, and a sad people. And I would say that's the kind of thing that we are experiencing here in the United Kingdom. It's the kind of thing that they were experiencing in the United States. And it's why somehow Donald Trump was able to cut through it to say, what is this that's happening? Do you ever wonder how come missionary movements and therefore nations have been changed across this world because of Scotland? It was because there were men like John Knox who were unashamed actually of faith. And that's why I say to people of faith here, and I know that not everybody is, but I say to people of faith, are you ashamed of the name of Christ and his name in public life? If so, why? Why? And for those of you that do not believe, Do you have a problem with me saying this on this stage? Because I don't want you to have a problem, because what I want to say is, if we are free and free indeed, then I am free to speak this name, which I believe is good for you and me. And that if we look at nations that have flourished before, it's because his name has been a public name. And people that have been in power have been unashamed to utter his name and to say that things cannot be done without him. And that's why if we're to increase from 0.002%, you will have to go into the churches to convince them too that we need the name of Christ made public. And we need to seek, and what does that mean? It's that we seek to build his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. We say there is no neutrality. There is not, as it's a lie to say secularism is neutral. It's not. We work a culture. It's not. Human rights is not neutral. Human rights is not neutral at all. It says the sum total of knowledge is me and you. Uh-oh. If the sum total of knowledge is you and me, then I can do with what I want. I can do. It means that I have the right to take the life of my unborn child if I want to. I have the right to kill myself if I want to. I have the right to change my sex if I want to. And who are you to tell me if not? There is no other law. Forget God, and what anchor do you have? Well, that's what secular human rights has given us. And they said that somehow that is neutral and good. And Christianity is bigoted and oppressive, when in fact it is the exact opposite. And further on, just after that, those men, John Knox, genuinely believed in the providence of God over all history. And if God had delivered Scotland and England so remarkably in their time, they reasoned it must be for a purpose. The years 1640 to 1660 became known as the Puritan Revolution in this country. And the revolution was led by pastors. And it was an era of unprecedented evangelism and Bible teaching across the country. Richard Baxter, a Puritan pastor, observed in his writings that godliness in Scotland had increased during this period to such a good degree that if their work in evangelism and teaching could have been carried on in like fashion for another 25 years, Scotland was likely to become a community of saints as the world had never seen. Scotland was in the grip of a real revival. New liberties were being established, new colleges, universities, a new charitable organisation, ministries of health to the poor and the flourishing, legal reforms towards justice, the elimination of cruelty, barbarity and torture, the rise of sciences, industry and international commerce. There's a direct correlation with when leaders and politicians speak Christ to the culture and all the things that flow from it. Scottish missionaries that flowed from, that came out of that movement, you know where they went? Across the world. But one place they went was Korea. Last week, was it last week? Maybe 2 weeks ago, I was in South Korea. The church there is huge. The church there is right at the heart of public life. They brought out onto the streets of Seoul 1.1 million people. That is 1 in 50 of the population. And what were they there for? They were there actually not to do worship, not to say Jesus is king. They were there to say, happy families, holy nation. They were there to say no to same-sex marriage. The church came out because the pastors understood that this was an attack on truth, on God's truth, that we're made in his image, that marriage is between one man and one woman. And for them, that was a truth matter. And they came to the streets in order to resist that. And the reason why I say that is because the sadness is, they were saying to me, the missionaries came and this is the fruit. The missionaries came from Scotland. 1 in 50. And I had the great honour of addressing, blows my mind, 1.1 million people that love Christ. You see, but the other thing is that just a few miles away from Seoul is North Korea. They pray day and night without ceasing in South Korea for the reunification of North and South Korea. But imagine this, in North Korea, what have they believed in? Communism. No God. An economy that's economy that's shot. You walk into the airport in South Korea and you feel first world. You feel the energy. They're flipping their Samsung phones everywhere. Everything is clean. It works. That's Christ culture. We have such a message of hope when we say this truth and all the truth that flows from him is good for the whole of culture. We'll build the best businesses because we'll be honest in business. We want to put profit into the hands of the people for their hard work. We will have policies that build up families because families create good economies. Because when families stay together, the economy flourishes and children do really well and they're healthy, happy and whole. Happy families, holy nation. Happy families, holy nation. Happy families, it works. It's the underpinning of all things. This is something to be really excited about. This is a message. It's a manifesto of hope. It's a manifesto of hope. And that's what you have. And that's what you've got to believe, that there's power in that message and people will respond to it. And you need to get to the highways and byways to do it. So you need to roll up your sleeves because this will take a long time and you are going to sometimes be ridiculed and all sorts of things will happen. But you've just got to keep on pressing on and believe that you can build. Or that God will take this movement to somewhere and you'll see what he does with it next. In terms of saying, we want to bring truth to the political sphere. We want, as I would say, we want to contend for Christ's principles because everything the Scottish Family Party stands for, everything the Scottish Family Party stands for, everything the Scottish Family Party stands for is those things that are aligned with Christ. So we make the culture. And then just to round up in the last 5 or so minutes that I have for this part of the afternoon, you know, when the King Charles III came to the throne, we're reminded of our great joint heritage, which is he's presented with the Bible. And it's actually the Scottish moderator that presents him with the Bible. And he says, will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel? That is our heritage, everyone. That's our heritage. And King Charles promised to do that. And then when he's handed the Bible, he's told, here is wisdom. This is royal law. These are the lively oracles of God. But our reality is that since his mother came to the throne in 1952, we've seen a massive social shift. And these are the policies, the truth policies, that you need to contend on. When she came to the throne in England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, in 1952, homosexuality and abortion were illegal. Now both are legal. And we've in fact aborted 10.4 million of our citizens. That is 1/6 of our population. Babies were born outside of marriage when the Queen came to the throne, 4.8%. Today it's 51.4%. Number of marriages in the population, 150. This is for England, Scotland and Wales. 150,000 in 1952. Today it's 230,000 with an increased population of 17 million. Divorces in 1952, 34,000. Today, 113,000 every year. That's a massive social shift. And that's something that we need
to be speaking into. When abortion became legal, it was still meant to be done under very, 2 doctors had to sign off. But what we've seen happen, of course, is essentially abortion on demand and called healthcare. But we've seen, as I say, the wiping out of 10.4 million, and so that's in fact more than 10%. It's 15% of the entire UK population. It's half of Edinburgh being killed every year. Imagine that. 250,000 people not having their first breath every single. So it's a massive social issue, and that social revolution was very bloody. That social revolution, since the Queen came to the throne, has been very bloody indeed. And then with all of that, what you end up, of course, all the things that flow from that, if you don't protect life, if you don't have a policy that values life and protects life, because good law is very simple. 10 commandments, you don't kill. You see, what happens when you begin to actually move away from truth, is you end up with a tyranny of laws and a tyranny of regulation. You can't move, you can't shift. There's a regulation here that will stop you doing that. Do not kill is a very simple line. Don't take the life of another human being. Once you put caveats on that, you actually end up in a system which tolerates and promotes the taking of another human life, which is now abortion. And of course, we know that we are in a massive battle both here in Scotland and in the Westminster Parliament, and Gordon MacDonald from Care Not Killing is here, but for law to change around the end of life, for assisted suicide to become law. This must be resisted. The Scottish Family Party, need to be press releasing on this. You need to be applying pressure on this. This is something that you need to be doing in order to get your voice into the public conversation. Another voice, another group that represents a constituency. This is what you need to be saying. You need to be writing. I know that you know this, but this is something that you need to be saying. And this is part of the strategy that you need to build, so that people are continually hearing from the Scottish Family Party and what their position is on these things. You need to be in the noise. It's not just about campaign season. It's not just about candidates, but you need to be building your social media profile, your podcast profile, saying some of these things. You need to get behind Care Not Killing and the resistance generally to assisted suicide in our nations at this particular time. When you don't care, when you don't protect at the beginning of life, we then shift into being able to experiment on the embryo, freeze the embryo. That then moves to the reordering of family, because you can now create a family, a man and a man, a woman and a woman, a single man, a single woman, by way of donor sperm or surrogacy. All of these things happen. You redefine family, which is away from truth. And that redefinition of family gets protected in law. And if you speak against it as a teacher, as a doctor, you're punished. That's tyranny. It's tyranny. It's not freedom at all. It's tyranny. And we need to speak. I don't understand why I, as Andrea Williams at Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre, for saying these things and for defending the people who stand for goodness and purity and truth, why they are the ones that lose their jobs and we are the ones that are seen as hateful. It is the opposite. We are the ones that love enough to speak the truth enough. We are the ones that have the courage enough to speak the truth enough. The Scottish Family Party is the ones that love enough to speak the truth enough, that have the courage of their convictions to speak truth into the public space. This idea that it is good for women to abort their babies up to birth and to have the freedom for it, that is a lie. It's a lie. It's not good for the women, it's not good for the children, and it's not good for the fathers. To say that marriage, to obliterate marriage, to say it's no longer between a man and a woman, does a massive disservice to the fabric of society. Those that then speak out, at the Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre, we have 1,000 case inquiries every year. If you'd ever told me when I qualified as a barrister in 1988 that I would spend much of my life, now I have a team of 8 full-time lawyers, but if you had spent that, I would spend my life defending, yes, a fantastic Scottish girl, a top student in a school in Scotland, who simply had a conversation in the sixth form common room with one of her friends and spoke biblical truth to him about the nature of marriage, that she would then be stripped of her captaincy, that she would be the one that got punished. I'd say that couldn't possibly happen. Well, it did. It has. Teachers losing their jobs for refusing to promote some of the books in primary school that promote trans ideology. Doctors losing their jobs for refusing to put on medical certificates that a biological man is a woman. All of this has come to pass. Social workers removed because people see their social profile. So, you at Scottish Family Party, you have something to say. You have really good news. And the people out there are longing to hear it. And they're longing for there to be a vehicle from which they can hear it. Part of the sadness in Scotland and in the United Kingdom and in England generally is the fact that the church has also in large part abandoned this truth or not spoken. So the church has begun to reflect the culture instead of speak truth to the culture. We need to get behind the churches that really believe and encourage them to speak truth to Scotland, to take their place in positions of leadership, to make Christ and his truth made known in the public places. And we also need to call out the churches that are not speaking the truth and are conforming to the culture. You know, I do believe that it looked unstoppable, the liberal movement that defied God's truth in the public space. But who would have imagined Nicola Sturgeon would fall, and that she would fall in the way that she did? We need to pray for Nicola Sturgeon, of course we do. But she, in part, I think in large part, fell because she was promoting, because there was a blindness, like there was a lot of blindness on this. She was promoting the transgender ideology, the Isla Bryson scandal. And that began to be really the moment at which the public began to wake up. J.K. Rowling, you know, look at the power of that woman who speaks truth. She speaks truth because she sees things straight. We need to love and pray for J.K. Rowling.
Still a feminist.
Correct. That's true, but correct. That is correct. But on this issue, on the trans issue, she is speaking truth. So, my hope and my prayer for the Scottish Family Party is that you would understand the task that is ahead of you, that you roll up your sleeves. It's not all around the party season, the campaigning season. The Scottish nation needs to hear from you and your views on these things. You need to be building the profile, building the presence, building the movement, to work hard on that, and believe that what you say will cut through. And you have to keep on pressing on. So I pray all success and prospering for you and for this movement. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thanks so much for your words. That was fantastic. Really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to join us. Now, do you remember where we first met years and years ago? Do you remember that?
Oh, now you're going to catch me out, aren't you? I know that I remember meeting you when I came up for the Edinburgh Fringe.
It was before then. We were both
But
on...
I definitely knew you before then. And when did I meet you before then?
We were on that current affairs programme, Scottish one, on a Sunday morning. The Big Questions.
Big questions, yeah.
We were both on the Big Questions, and I recognised Andrea and said hello, and we had a chat all those years ago. I think it was about the smacking ban we were talking about. Right, so we thought it'd be interesting to discuss a few issues and to tap into Andrea's wisdom and experience in these areas. So I've got a few questions to ask. Now, the first thing I was curious about, I mean, basically being based in London, you must look at Scotland. What's the impression you gain of Scotland in terms of the issues that you're interested in? What's the scene up here? How does it seem to you?
I think that it's worse here. Things are going faster and more furious in terms of the abandoning of abandoning of truth. So I think that you are ahead of us, and I think that sometimes you as you go ahead of us, then that's used as a pressure point for us to follow. So I think that it's worse in Scotland. So that's what I'd say in quick response.
Yeah, I think that's what we'd say too. as well, I think it's been interesting since we've had the Labour UK government. It suddenly seemed as if we've been hearing the same from the Westminster Parliament that we've been hearing here for years and years and years.
Yes.
So maybe you're going to have a taste of it.
I think the other thing that's striking to me about Scotland is the loss of the church. Mm-hmm. So again, the loss of your established church in terms of its promotion of same-sex marriage, its punishing of faithful Orthodox ministers. Those things came slightly ahead. It's been happening also in England and Wales, but we've really seen that in Scotland. And if you lose the voice that's expected to speak to power, because normal people, just the regular folk, just think, well, like, we need to hear about the church from the Church of Scotland or the Presbyterian Church. We need to hear these things, but actually those have been lost. So that's another thing that you lost earlier than us.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately. Now, sorry, if we just pull the thing. I'd be really interested to hear what you think. In terms of Christians being awake and engaged with these issues, I know there'll be frustrations. We would like Christians and churches to be more active, to speak more. Which direction is the trend in, do you think? Do you think churches and Christians are becoming more engaged and active in these issues, or less, or a mixture?
You can see that I didn't rehearse the answers to these questions. I wanted to do them as in a conversation. And obviously I spend my whole life doing this. And what I can say, over 30 years of doing this now, 34 years since I qualified, is that the single most difficult thing for me personally has been the church's lack of sound in seeing the issues that you are contending for. So freedom to speak faith, family, and the protection of life from the moment of conception to the point of natural death. These are actually the issues, the Genesis 1 issues, where the gospel is under attack. And the church has not spoken in the public space on them. Now, back in the 1980s, when I was studying and then qualifying, the culture looked very different. And so I was very, very good friends with a number of leading, who are now have been leaders of major churches and networks. And they were doing great works of church growth and evangelism. And I remember at that point, back in the 1980s and early 90s, thinking, in a sense, I'm a lawyer, I'll get on with doing the law, and I'll leave my friends in the church to get on with doing the church. And I viewed that a little bit, I viewed that too narrowly. I viewed it as as in a sense the church views itself, which is we're going to do Bible studies, we're going to do prayer meetings. Only if you, what a prayer meeting, sorry, this is a quick aside. In Korea, the church has been praying 24/7. Major church has been praying 24/7 for 18 years for the reunification with North Korea. I arrived on the Friday. I went straight to an evening meeting. I spoke at 9 p.m. They were still there at 1 p.m. They were praying on a Friday night, 1,000 of them. I got up at 5:45. I was in another prayer meeting with 3,000 people on a Saturday morning in the center of Seoul, in a church that's opposite their Supreme Court. This church in Korea prays. That's what prayer looks like. And that particular church, that's a lie-in on a Saturday, because they pray every morning at 5:30. And 1,000 people come to the church in Central Seoul to pray for their nation at 5:30 in the morning. And they said, some of these leaders said to me, Andrea, thank you for coming in 2014. We heard what you said about standing on these issues of redefining a family around life. We heard you. Thank you for coming. You've made a difference. And I said, thank you for praying. The difference is that they were able to hear the word because they were really praying. So there's a sense in which we're flabby as a church. If we believe in the power of prayer, then we would do it. Then we would really do it, and we'd do it a bit more like the Koreans did. If we had a state of the nation like we've got in Scotland, we'd never stop praying. You know, because we'd be saying, how is 0.002% going to ever? How are we going to change things? Well, we're not by human might. There has to be something that's quite divine and supernatural about it. To get back on my track, because but the point about it was really that I thought I'll leave them alone. But they were actually shrinking the gospel to just be almost about Bible studies, as opposed to the application to the whole of life. And the gospel has something, it's about the gospelization of the whole of life, from Genesis to Revelation. And the kind of questions that society is now asking is not, is the Bible true? Was Mary a virgin? Was Jesus resurrected from the dead? Which were the kind of apologetics questions in the 1970s and 80s. Today people are saying, am I male or female? Can a man and a man marry? That's now where when does life begin? Those are actually the cultural questions of our time. And my generation of church leaders, the generation before me, to some degree, but my generation has abandoned speaking into that. And then the generation after that. But where I do see some hope, and you see it in Mark Smallwood, where this generation, or what I call them the Wilberforce Collective, but this next generation of men and women have lived with the fallout of their parents and church leaders abandoning the truth. In fact, abandoning the truth. And they're living with loneliness. Kind of sin is sad, bad, and mad. So what happens is people don't even know who they are. They're lonely. They don't know why. They're distressed. And this new generation is saying, we're done with it. This kind of so-called freedom has brought us no freedom at all. You know what? We know someone who can give you freedom. We know the Savior of the world. We know somebody who can understand our identity. And so we know that somebody can speak into what is life. That the abortion issue is the greatest humanitarian issue of our time. And they're powerful. And what I'd love to see in this nation is that there's a group of young people who see these things clearly. There's also this whole group of people I see sort of revival in a number of denominations. And I want to see the meshing of that kind of worship type revival with the understanding of the culture. And I feel like if that got ignited with 24/7 prayer, well, imagine what would happen in these aisles of ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Now, if we imagine a sort of hypothetical Christian who's sort of not really interested in these issues or doesn't really want to get engaged, want to take any action, do you think the reason is more... if you leave the talking to me, if you wouldn't mind. Do you think the reason is more that they're not aware of the issues? They don't know about them, they need to learn about them? Or is it they do know about them, but don't see them as important or don't care enough about them? Which is it mainly, do you think?
Well, I suppose, almost... in answering the last question, I think I could have said one more thing which leads into this, which is that it's about leadership. One of the keys to the people understanding is that leaders of churches, so I'm speaking to the pastors in the churches here, need to be bold and explain to their congregation what the Bible says on these matters and how that will impact them in their day-to-day life. Church is not a club. Church is not a club. Church is actually a place where we need to get ready to go into a cultural battle. It is, and again, I'm going to speak in very Christian terms, but there is a spiritual battle out there between good and evil, between heaven and hell, between that purity and impurity, between sanity and insanity, and we are right in the middle of it. And in order to get ready for that, we need one another. We need to be trained under good teachers who understand the Bible and understand the times, and together we can be strong. But if we aren't trained, then we won't know how to do it. And so one of the offerings at Christian Concern is this Wilberforce Collective in order to strengthen the next generation so that we will be emboldened and fearless, just as Mark described how he ended up being fearless in the situation, or when he went into a meeting with his boss, he took a deep breath because he could well have become one of our clients. We saw you quoted in the newspaper, out you go. That's all it takes. That might be all it takes. And so there's this issue of the ministers, the pastors need to speak.
Yep.
And then the congregations will follow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, I think my next question, that's an answer to it. But let's see if you've got any other answers to it as well. What works to motivate Christians in these areas? You've said teaching and leadership.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think?
Love. What's the mark of a Christian? That you really love God, that you really love Jesus, that you really love him. And if you really love him, you will really love his truth. You will really speak for him. You will hunger after him. And if you really love him, you will really love your neighbor. And if you really love your neighbor, you will lay down your life for your neighbor. You won't mind if you've got a bad tweet against you. You won't mind if you won't fear anything coming at you. What is there to fear? If Christ, who rules the world, died on a cross for us, and that which looked like complete loss and defeat was a victory, what is there to fear? And there's a sense in which we live in fear. There's generally a culture of fear, but there's a culture of fear even among the Christians when we should be the opposite. Because inside of us we have the Spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead. The power which raised him is the same power that indwells us. What have we to fear in speaking out? In this nation it's about fearing we might lose our jobs, we might be made fun of. So, you know what? People do go to prison. They do get arrested. And losing their jobs and being silenced is pretty nasty. They don't have to kill us. Because either we don't speak or that's enough. There are people across the world that will be killed even today for their faith. And I want to say for the Christians and for the church just generally, if you're to make the difference, then you need to be ready to die to reputation, die to all things for his sake. And when we've got a church that's like that, really like that, then we will be different. And I'll give another little anecdote here, which I used to say quite a lot. I don't say it quite as much anymore. Running was my comeback from cancer. There's something fantastic when you train for a marathon and you've got a little running club and you're looking at your times and you rock up on a Saturday morning for your 5K or your training runs, and then you get your longer runs and you're talking about your fuel, and then you kind of finish the race and there's a bit of a buzz and adrenaline. And I'm in my club. I love it. I understand the parameters. It's really exciting. That for me, I can go into churches and feel so flat. Because my club, the running club, really is exciting. I know the goal. We're aiming for the goal. There's the adrenaline rush, the post-adrenaline rush of the run. In the church, I'm thinking, we know the Saviour of the world. Assisted suicide is tomorrow. We're not even mentioning it. People could die. Church, awake, arise, wake up. If you love the vulnerable in your society, if you love the elderly and the sick, if you want to care for people, you will awaken. It's like we are lukewarm.
Yeah, thank you. I've just got a couple of questions left. Now, I'll try and follow some of I follow some of the Christian Legal Centre's cases. To be honest, there's so many of them.
Yeah, there are.
I can't follow them all, but I follow quite a lot. Now, in these cases, where's the balance? How much of the problem is bad laws, and how much of the problem is bad judges?
It's both. It's actually both. At the Christian Legal Centre, we have 1,000 case inquiries every year. At the moment, we've got about 70 live cases. So the ones that you see, and there are many of them that you see, but even though that's just the tip of the iceberg. And because our heart at Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre is to do every case that comes across our threshold where a Christian has got into trouble for loving Jesus, for speaking out their faith. So we mean what we say. And we will stand alongside the people that, as a result of loving Christ, find themselves in trouble with the law. So that's the heart of Christian Concern in the Christian Legal Centre. I honestly felt when God brought the work to me in a sense. It wasn't a design of mine, but it's because people came to me because they were getting into trouble with the law. And I said, of course I'll help you, before the Christian Legal Centre was born. And that's what gave me the idea that's how it evolved. If you had said to me when I was in the 1980s, if you had ever said to me that a nurse would lose her job for offering prayer, I'd have said that couldn't possibly happen in Great Britain. That street preachers would be locked up. That you would get a letter from the Scottish government telling you that there might be a criminal offence for praying in your home if it was within the parameters of a buffer zone. I said this couldn't possibly happen. If you'd ever said to me in the 1980s that marriage would be redefined to be between two men and two women, I said that can't happen. If you'd ever said to me that you could rewrite your birth certificate so that you could say that your sex was female, I'd have said this is lunacy. This is putting a lie into law. What we have done, in effect, if you want to speak Christian language, through our equality and diversity and human rights legislation, is we have legislated to protect sin. And uphold sin and promote sin, and to punish those that speak against it. So you have something that is systemic. But again, if a society is blind, when I was talking about the church has to speak in order for people's eyes to be opened, then it actually thinks that which it has protected in law is a good, is a human right, when in fact it harms. And to love is to speak against the harm that it is doing. When you've got written into law one that says we do not protect life, that harms. And we're in danger right now of protecting giving people permission to kill themselves. That harms. It can never be a good. So I remember as a young lawyer saying, and I'm getting to answer your question now, is that the legislation, I remember asking a Christian judge in 1990, it was very specific, it was around the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act of 1990. It's about experimenting on embryos. It was about opening up rules around abortion at that time. And I remember I was newish, quite about 25. I remember saying, these laws are bad. And he said, Andrea, this is a Christian judge, an influential Christian judge that I love still very much. But he said to me, Andrea, we are here to apply the law, not make the law. We're Christian lawyers. And I said, but what if the law is bad? And that's the point. And at that point, that was one of the first times in my life when I began to see, well, I didn't even know if I was right, to be honest, at that point. In a sense, because this was somebody who was revered in Christian circles and on every evangelical platform. And I'm thinking, but the law is really bad. And the lawyers are meant to be the watchman on the wall. If we can't speak, then who will speak? If Christian lawyers can't speak against bad laws, then who will speak? If Christians don't speak against bad laws, who will speak? Who else has God got? He's only got us. He's only got the Christians and people that see. So the laws, it's laws, but then the judges are also part of it because they're also part. There's been a lot of judicial activism, put it this way. This way.
Yeah. Right, thank you. I've just got one last question. This is a very sensitive area to bring up. I mean, this is a real challenge we've had in the family party for some years now. But to be honest, we're at our wits' end. I know you've had many years of experience facing this challenge. I wonder if you might have some strategies and coping mechanisms you can share with us. Just how on earth do you cope with Neil?
We throw a few good times and yummy times. We love Neil. We love Neil.
Right, thank you so much for sharing with us in your speech. And now that was really fantastic. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I hope the rest of your little tour of Scotland goes well. Do go along to Andrea's other events. That would be great. So,
God bless you, everyone. I really hope that you go from strength to strength as a movement, as a political movement. So I really do.
Thank you.